Well, thank you so much for joining me. We are back and we are going to continue to go through the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. That is the abridged code of Jewish law, the abridged set table. And we're up to Siman 9 and it's entitled The Laws of Tzitzit. So what are tzitizit? They are essentially fringes that Orthodox Jewish men are obligated to wear according to the Torah. I think there's about 5 places in the Torah where it is specifically mentioned, and it is believed that being the case, there are 5 positive commandments that one is observing when they're wearing tzitzit. And it's a time-based commandment, so it's not obligatory for women to wear tzitzit, and certainly not for them to wear tzitzit as a man does. That would be cross-dressing, which is forbidden in the Torah. And as we get into it, we'll see hopefully that you can see why these more pertain to men rather than women. We are told in the Torah that we are to look upon them and to remember all the commandments of Hashem. And men are very much optically stimulated compared to women. Women are more emotionally stimulated. And so the tzitzit are very much a part of the male Orthodox Jewish walk. And it's a command that's being fulfilled from the time a person puts them on to the time a person takes them off. Now, the big question is, are people who recognize Yeshua as the Messiah, are they obligated to wear tzitzit? Now, it's debated very heavily. The majority of the Messianic movement do wear them, and there is a group called they don't call themselves this name. This is a name that's been attributed to them, which I guess some of the groups embrace, but it's called the Hebrew Roots movement. And there is a trend in that movement that's been observed for quite a few years now, and that is having tzitzit tied to the belt loops of a pair of pants, four fringes tied to the belt loops of a man's pants, which is, it's off its head, really. It's completely unacceptable, because the whole idea of the command is that the threads are to adorn the 4 corners of a garment. They are exclusively to adorn the 4 corners of a garment. Not 5 corners, not 6 corners, not 2 corners. 4-cornered garments. I don't think you can have 2 corners for a garment. You've got to at least have 4. But it's a real. It's almost deceptive, really, because when they have the shirts hanging, their outer shirt untucked, a person isn't aware that that's actually where they're hanging from, and it's very deceptive. And I don't know why they do it. I've heard excuses over the years that some people find them in the summer months too hot to wear, which is really not a really strong argument, because people even in Australia would wear a singlet 365 days a year. Certainly they did in the past. But yeah, this is something that is a very, very terrible trend within that demographic of the Messianic observant people. So that's something that I am completely against, and I think, I don't know how it came about or who initiated it, but it's something that I've seen and I've continued to see, and I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want to see it anymore. It's just as we get through this Siman and we have a look at some of the laws regarding tzitzit, we're going to actually see that it's better off. You're going to find it's better off not to wear tzitzit at all if you're not wearing a 4-cornered garment. They're exclusive to a 4-cornered garment. So I definitely wanted to mention that before we get out of the gates on this particular Siman. Now, this Siman is going to take at least 2 videos, possibly 3. It's quite a long Siman. It has 21 sofim in it, and it's fairly in-depth. I also want to, before we get started, address where my leniencies are, where my allegiance is, I guess, in terms of, what I believe. Still getting the odd person questioning my faith in Yeshua as the Messiah, largely because of the content of the videos, because you just don't see these type of videos with these subjects that we're looking at, with just getting down and doing hard yards and actually learning the Torah in most of the Messianic teachers that release videos across the web. They tend to sort of sit in the Netzarim Ketuvim, otherwise known as the New Testament, and simply keep their eye focused on Yeshua's actions during that space and time, and extrapolate teachings from that. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but there is a vast chasm of, there's a vast wasteland, I should say, of or a huge void of actually teaching people Torah not happening. And so this is part of the reason that I wanted to do these videos and look at some of the finer points of actually being observant, whether you are an Orthodox Jew or you are a Noahide, or you're looking to convert. If you're able to convert, because it's really not possible to convert unless you go for a reform conversion, which I completely am against. You shouldn't be doing anything, dabbling at all with any community, any Reformed Jewish community. The only communities that I will give you any credibility in the Jewish world are the ultra-Orthodox. And these are the people that are going to be the most aggressive and the most these are the people that are going to reject you the hardest, because they just don't understand where you're coming from. When you mention Yeshua, they will think you're talking about Jesus, and they're going to be running a mile. And that's a good thing, because that means they're legit. One of the things that I've carried for many years is the concept that if an Orthodox Jew is very reserved and perhaps doesn't want to have an association with me, then that to me shows his legitimacy. But when they very much want to interact with me and want me to be a part of what they're doing, knowing where I stand, I always find that suspicious, because I should look like an apikorsum, I should look like a heretic in their eyes at this stage of the game, because that accords with their halakha, because it's by divine decree that they are blinded for a time. And I'm very suspicious of Orthodox Jews that give me any weight at all. It's the ones that perhaps the most aggressive and the most standoffish that I give the most credence to, and the most I respect. I know that sounds weird, but maybe it'll make sense to you down the track if you keep learning with me. Okay, so just to get that out of the way, the only reason that you're questioning whether I have faith in Yeshua is because you are not used to this style and this in-depth of teaching of Torah. You are more acquainted with the Christian style of teaching that focuses purely on what Yeshua is doing and what he has done and what he did and what he's going to do. And you are less familiar with teaching that causes you to be obligated to be a diligent student and to learn and to be obedient and to observe things and to take on new things every day. This is completely foreign to you. And when you listen to a lecture or a teaching like this, and you don't hear Yeshua's name every couple of sentences, you lose it and you completely go off the derrick, go off the path, and think, oh, this guy must be teaching Orthodox Judaism. Well, in a sense I am, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have rejected the Messiah. Absolutely not. I can prove many times over that Yeshua was a Second Temple era Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jew with a very special mission, a very unique mission, to sift lost Israel from the nations. And that's what should be all of us to some degree on our charge. This doesn't mean that we go and missionize to Orthodox Jews. Heaven forbid we do not do that, because we are risking spiritual murder if we do that. We simply learn from them. They're the ones that have got something to teach us. We don't really have anything to teach them. It doesn't matter if you've got the right guy. If you have the wrong mission attributed to that guy and the wrong type of identity and character attributed to that guy, it doesn't matter if you happen to have the right guy or not. You've got the wrong identity and the wrong mission overlaid to the right guy. So it's neither here nor there. You've got nothing really. You don't have the Torah if you have a Christian background, and it doesn't matter if you've got the right guy, because you've got the wrong interpretation of the right guy. So it's a pointless exercise, and I encourage you to consider, if you're still fraternizing with the Christian world, to refrain from doing so and to learn Torah. And learn Torah that's applicable to you, but of course, the main thing is to read the weekly Torah portion and read the daily aliyot pertaining to those Torah portions. That's your main goal, and to read Psalms, particularly if you are a woman, with concentration, and follow the monthly reading of the Psalms, which is according to the cycle that the Orthodox Jews adhere to. Find out where they are in their readings of the book of Psalms and Tehillim, and join the chorus of the people that are pouring out their hearts to Hashem through the words of David HaMelech. That's where I stand on that. Stop fraternizing with Christianity. Christianity are going to be brought under judgment. They have got blood on their hands like you wouldn't believe. You only have to go back and look at the Crusades, and look at the Inquisitions and all the countless pogroms and all the horrific things they've done to Hashem's people over the centuries. It doesn't matter if they're sort of fluffy teddy bears now. That can all change in an instant. That can all change overnight. We see the same pattern happen with a lot of the early church fathers, which tried to get the Jews on board with their interpretations, their Trinitarian interpretations, and so on and so forth. And we saw how quickly their attitude towards the Jews changed from loving kindness to aggressive and violent. The early church fathers, many of their writings attest to this. And I've got videos on YouTube you can watch. One in particular, a video entitled Positive Christianity, the religion of the Nazis, or something like that. The title, something like that. And that is a very good video with a lot of quotes from the early church fathers regarding the Jews. Okay, I've got that out of the way. I've got that off my chest. It's probably meant that a few people have turned the video off. Good. Go away. If you're still with me, good on you, and thank you for choosing to learn with me today. So we're looking at Siman 9, Laws of Tzitzit, and this, as I said, contains 21 seifim. We'll probably do this in 2 or 3 videos. We're just going to take our time, and we're going to do the hard yards together, rung by rung of the ladder, and we're going to make our way through this topic. Number 1 is the importance of the mitzvah, size and quality of the garment and strings. Number 2, the linen garment, the nature of the linen garment. 3 through 4 on the corner. 5 and 6, preparing the tzitizit tassel. 7 and 8, donning the talit. Number 9, the blessing. Number 10, interruption in the mitzvah. Number 11, borrowing a talit. Number 12, material of the garment. Number 13, severed strings. Number 14, twisted strings. Number 15, a divided talit garment. 16 and 17, laws of the corner of the garment. Number 18 through 19, repairing and discarding tzitzit. 20, human dignity. And 21, care in performing the mitzvah. The Torah commands, according to Bamidbar, the book of Numbers 15:38, that when wearing a garment that has 4 corners, one must affix tzitzit, that is tassel-like fringes, to the corners of the garment. They shall make themselves fringes in the corners of their garment. Each of the tzitzit, or the tassels, is made up of 4 strings that are inserted into the corners of the garment and then knotted and twisted in a specific manner to form a braided tassel. Now, the Karaites, which are a anti-rabbinical movement, which are floating about today, and they have managed to find various inroads into the wider Messianic community, really just because they're probably the only ones that will listen to them. They have different interpretations of the whole concept of the tzitizit, the fringes, and they do whatever they can to avoid doing the actual fringes on the four corners of the garments, anything that is similar to Rabbinic Judaism. So they just take the references in the Torah, which is, as I said, about 5 references, and they run with them and they make up their own tradition, which in a sense is uniform to their particular belief system. And so in effect, they just avoid the rabbinical execution of this mitzvah, and they do their own. And so I have absolutely no affiliation with the Karaites, and I encourage all of you to drop and completely sever and do so immediately. Any ties that you have, no pun intended, speaking of tzitizits and tying and knotting them together, with those communities, because their main agenda is to get you to just become sympathetic to charism and beef up their numbers. They really couldn't care less about Yeshua. They just want people to help be on board with their belief and validate them. Okay, so number 1, how great is the commandment of tzitizit, i.e. the reward for its observance and punishment for its neglect is very great. And you can read about that in Tractate Mahasha Minichot 43b. And it talks about the punishment of the actual not wearing the actual tzitizit. And the punishment is found in Job 38:13, where it talks about shaking the corners of the earth. And that's a reference to the 5 Malachim that come and awaken the corpse of a deceased person after the last person leaves the actual burial site, and they awaken the person, and in their earthly body return the neshama back to the earthly body, and they go through a process of removing the klippah, that is removing the husk or the shell of the dark forces that has been accrued over the person's lifetime, in at times a very violent way, and it's referred to as, in English, as the beatings of the grave. And so the idea is that they grab the 4 corners of the earth and they shake it, shake the corners of the earth, and that's a kind of an analogy of the person being shaken, because their body originally came from the earth and returns to the earth, and the angels shake the person violently in the amount of times that the person should have shaken their talit before they put it on. Before you put it on, you give it a bit of a shake. And so a person who has not worn the talit, they're actually shake the person in proportion to how many times the person never did it. And and so it depends on the level of righteousness of the person. If the person wore tzitizit all their waking hours of their life, then obviously they're not going to get anything like that occurring during that period of the torments of the grave. I think it's called Kibbut HaKaver. And it's a subject that I'd love to do a video on, and very few people teach on the torments of the grave. Because it's a very good topic to enable a person to build in their fear of Hashem when they know, if they don't behave themselves, what's coming even before they might be subjected to Gehenna. There is a lot of things there's a lot of hoops that have to get jumped through before a person even is eligible to go to Gehenna, which is a horrific place. It's not a comfortable place at all. It's a very, very frightening place. But if you are eligible to go there and you're not, they don't put you into the 7th precinct, of which there's no return, then it does come to some sort of an end at some point. But that's not something you should breathe a sigh of relief on. You don't want to go there at all. Anyway, I'm rambling and I'm sidetracking. Let's get back into the subject of tzitizit. We got on this subject because we looked at the rewards and the punishments for its observance, the reward for its observance, and the punishment of its neglect, both being very great. The reward for wearing the tzitzit is the divine presence will reside with the person. A person will always have the divine presence to some capacity with him if there was tzitzit. This is evident for the Torah equates this commandment and also connects it to all the commandments of the Torah combined, as the verse in Bamidbar 15:39 states, "And you shall see it, the tzitzit, and you shall remember all of the commandments of Hashem and perform them." Seeing the tzitzit reminds one of the commandments because the numerical value of the word tzitzit alludes to the 613 commandments as follows. The letters of the word tzitzit have the numerical value of 600. Add to that the 8 strings that hang down from the knots of each tassel and the 5 knots tied in each tassel. This adds up to a total of 613, the total number of the commandments in the Torah. So I have a talit katan, a talit gadol, which is a large talit, which is one that's normally worn for prayer and high holidays, not one that is worn under the garment, which I have here, which is a talit katan. We can see that there are 4 fringes tied in a specific manner on each corner, and the way the talit is actually worn is meant to have. You're meant to wear it in such a way where the actual fringes, 2 hang at the front and 2 hang at the back. You don't put the talit over like this and simply wear it over the shoulders like a cloak, because that's how the Romans wore their garment. You would bring it up over the back of the head because it serves as a chamber or a prayer closet, and you can grab it. There's various ways of doing it. I normally do it this way. I grab the front corner there and pull it down, and then I grab the other front corner there and pull it down. So I have 2 fringes at the front, and hanging at the front, and I have 2 fringes hanging on either side. There's one, if you can see it there, and here's the other one. If you can see that there. There's many ways you can put it on. If that seems a bit too complicated to you, one of the ways my rabbi of blessed memory used to show me is you can hold it like this, simply and bring it around the back and just pull it up over like that, and you've pretty much got it. The 2 at the front and the 2 at the back. So you've got a tzitzit in here and here, and at the back to the left and at the back to the right. So the idea is that it surrounds you kind of like a protective sort of perimeter, like a protective fence. Now I'm not going to wear this for the entirety of the video, so you'll just excuse me. I'll just put it over there. It's merely for demonstrative purposes. Okay, so the word tzitzit itself has a total numerical value of 600, and the 8 strings, add to that the 8 strings that hang down from the knots of each tassel, and the 5 knots tied in each tassel adds to a total of 13. Okay, so that's one little insight there. There's another very interesting insight, and it talks about the windings and the actual amount of knots that adorn each of the 4 fringes. There are 13 windings and there are 26 knots, which a numerical value total of 39, which has the same numerical value as the expression Hashem is Echad, or Yad Hei Vav Hei is Echad. That's Hashem's name. And so you are not only wearing Hashem's name on your body, you are wearing the actual shape of Hashem's name in accordance with its numerical value. So that on a deeper level, rather than actually wearing that phrase in Hebrew, somehow maybe woven or written onto the garment, it is actually infused onto the garment by way of shapes and by way of tying and by way of positioning. And so therefore the name is upon you and its oneness is upon you, but it's not in a conventional written form. It's done in a way that represents that value and represents that concept, which is an extremely interesting thing. Now, if you go by way of the Karaites, you don't get any of that. You get whatever they're going to do, and there is really no long-standing tradition since Mount Sinai that the rabbinical establishment has with that. And during Yeshua's time, that was how they were tied. That was how they were tied, more or less. Not exactly, but more or less. Now, the big question that a lot of you may have is, did Yeshua wear tzitzit? Well, we have a few verses, quite a few actually, more than a few, that are telltale signs that he actually did wear tzitzit. Now, the most obvious one is the woman with the issue of blood that comes into the crowded square and touches his fringe. Okay, so that's one instance. And there's another instance where he is speaking about how some of the Pharisees and the Sadducees wore wide tefillin. So the tefillin boxes were wide and large, and their tzitzit, their fringes, hung down and dragged along the ground behind them as a show of authority and power, and look how awesome I am. And so Yeshua was a little bit more subtle than that. And you can actually buy smaller tefillin boxes. They call them travel tefillin, and they're quite significantly cheaper than the normal kosher tefillin that you can buy. And there's a standard length to the tzitzit as well. You don't want them to be too small, and you don't want them to be too long. Also, when the Romans divided lots for his clothing, that is believed that was his prayer shawl, his garment. There's also the expression, when you pray, close the door, Matthew 6:6, and that expression is actually referring to the talit, which in effect is a prayer closet. Not everybody is rich enough to actually dwell in a house with a door. So what was really being spoken about in Matthew, and also you can find it in the book of Jasher, because the same language is used when referring to Enoch, that he would go and he would wrap himself in his chamber. And the same Hebrew words are used there in that expression. And so this is, in effect, a partition or a chamber that a person wraps himself in and actually closes the door, and you can pull the talit right down over the face. And you're in a private little space, even when you're in a crowded area with a large group of people praying, you have privacy. And so then people may find Shaul's reference to wearing a head covering hanging down over the face as being something that might conflict with that, but that is talking about something completely different, which was a Roman custom, and it was something that was crossing the line, for want of a better word, of the issue of cross-dressing. All right, let's keep going. So far we've found that there is a way that they are tied onto a person. Now, you can tie them yourself, and when you do that, you have to say the bracha. When you put them on, you actually have to say the bracha and actually look at them, and there's a specific bracha for wearing the talit katan that you say, and there is a different bracha for wearing the talit gadol, the large tent or the large talit. Okay, because the tzitzit are worn to remind a person of all the commandments, therefore, every man must take care to have a talit katan. That is the small talit, which I just mentioned, literally the small cloak or garment. There you go. This refers to the smaller tzitzit garment that is customarily worn throughout the day. This is in contrast to the larger tzitzit garment or talit gadol, literally large cloak worn during the morning prayers. Now, it's no longer the custom that we wear a four-cornered garment in modern society. And so the Orthodox Jews will wear a talit katan, which is neatly worn underneath the normal modern shirt. and so it's not, it doesn't draw the eye, it doesn't make a person stick out, because the idea is to wear the least ostentatious clothes as you can. You want to be well presented, but you don't want to stick out and show that you're different from everybody else. You want to be part of the community, and you show that in how you dress, which doesn't mean that you can dress poorly. It means you just dress smartly, and according to the local custom. And so the talit gadol is worn at the commencement of prayer, a formal ritual service, which was something that wasn't done in ancient times, because they were able to wear a four-corner garment throughout the day, because that was just normal attire back in ancient times, in biblical times. The good thing about wearing a four-corner garment, which is like a large flowing robe or a cloak, is that it actually breaks up the form of the body. So there's, you're not revealing any nakedness there. If we see the way people dress today, it seems like clothes are getting tighter and tighter and smaller. We're really truly living in a wicked generation. And it is very much very close to the last hours of mankind, literally. The following is a description of the ideal features of a talit katan. It should be made of the wool of sheep. It should be white, as large as the required measurement. That is 3/4 of an armor long. Now, how big is that? That's roughly 36 to 43.3 centimeters. In front of him, and 3/4 of an armor behind him. The hole for the neck does not count toward the measurement, according to Mishnah Berurah 8:17. Those who make the talit katan sewn up at the sides must be careful that it should be open on each side by a discernible majority of the length of the garment, and the sides may not even be closed with hooks. In addition, every person should take care to have the talit gadol with tzitizit, in which to wrap himself during the morning prayers. One should endeavor to beautify the mitzvah by having a beautiful talit. Indeed, this is also true with regard to all the commandments. One must fulfill them in the most beautiful way possible, whatever is in your ability to afford. So the rule of measure is you want to give a beautiful gift to your wife. However much you would spend on buying a beautiful gift for your wife, that's the minimum of how much you should spend on purchasing a menorah, mezuzah, tefillin, or talit. Don't skimp on the purchase of religious objects. Buy the best you can possibly afford, whether it's a shofar or whatever it is. You always want to have the best within your budget. It's all part of your service to Hashem. For it is written in Shemot 15:2, "This is my Hashem, and I will beautify him." So that's where they get this whole concept of beautifying the mitzvah, beautifying the commandment. And we interpret it homiletically in Shabbos, Tractate Shabbos 133b, to mean beautify yourself before him in the fulfillment of the commandments. Through the enhanced performance of the commandments, one makes himself beautiful before Hashem. One should be careful to buy tzitizit strings from a trustworthy person, so he can be sure that they are prepared with regard to the spinning and twisting of the thread, explicitly for the sake of the tzitizit, and in accordance with the laws of making tzitizit. Tzitizit strings must also be proper length, be the proper length. Now, there's a lot of footnotes here, but I'm not going to read them all. So if you want to, I recommend you get a copy of the volume 1 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and follow along with me with your book, and we can learn together. You can have that there as a reference and go along with me and read these videos and have the book there and go back and double check and investigate some of the footnotes and get a little bit deeper if you so choose. I will try and read some of the footnotes, though. I'm not saying I'm ignoring them. Absolutely, I will read them if I can, or if I see that that's important. Okay. In accordance with the laws of making tzitizit, the tzitizit strings must also be proper length. Yeah, okay, we read that. Okay, so safe to regarding one who has no alternative but to have linen talit, because it's best to have a woolen talit and woolen strings, in which it is not possible, I have forbidden to affix woolen tzitizit, because that's shatnez, that's mixing. We can't have wool with linen due to shatnez prohibition. There is an opinion that says that he should make the corners of the garment out of leather and place upon them woolen tzitzit, so that the linen and wool are not directly connected. However, there are dissenting opinions which hold that this should not be done. See Shari Tshuva, end of Siman 9. Now, best case scenario is go to a kosher website that sells tzitzit. Talit Biz is the one I go to. And just buy the best one you can afford. And some people say, well, it says in the scriptures that you should make tzitzit for yourselves, is the expression that you read in scriptures translated. And so they say, well, you've got to make them yourselves. That's not true, because not everybody has the ability to make them. Not everybody has the intellect, or maybe a person's missing an arm and they've only got one arm. How can they make tzitzit with one arm? I'm sure somebody can do it out there. But the best course of action is to buy kosher talit katan and talit gadol, and buy several talit katans, because you're going to go through them if you're going to be wearing them throughout the day in your workplace and so on and so forth. Whereas you are less likely to wear out your talit gadol because it's used on special occasions. Just a quick mention: washing them. You are to bag up the tzitzit with a plastic bag with elastic bands, so that the water doesn't get into the actual the tekelet, which we're going to get into in a minute, which is the sky blue thread that should be part of each fringe, because that is, if it's kosher, it's the blood of a sea snail or a cuttlefish, depending on which you believe is the actual kosher animal. But we'll get into that in a sec. Because that will bleed through the wash, because you're wearing, essentially, when you're wearing the tekelet, the blue threads on each tzitzit, you are technically wearing the blood of an animal, and that's representative of the blood of Yeshua, as it says in Exodus 12:13. He will see the blood and he will pass over you. Okay. Number 3, so we're up to Save 3. The tzitzit strings must be tied into the corners of their garments, Bamidbar 15:38. Save 3 discusses the practical application of this requirement. The hole through the tzitzit strings are inserted, should not be positioned at a distance from the edge of the garment, both in its length and its width, more than 3 thumb breadths. Some say that these thumb breadths are measured at the place on the thumb that is narrow, that is at the top of the thumb, and it's proper to take the stringent approach to this. The footnote for that reads, but Mishnah Berurah 11:19 holds that it is measured at the widest part of the topmost joint. The tzitzit strings cannot be inserted higher than this distance, because higher than 3 thumb breadths away is not considered the corner of the garment. Rather, it is considered the main body of the garment, and the tzitzit must be placed in the corners of that garment. So if we have a look at this talit gadol here, which is sort of like, it's 2 down from the largest size you can purchase, and I recommend that you get the largest talit that you can afford, because the idea is that after you pass away, you're to be wrapped in your talit in the grave. The tzitzit are severed, and they are gently laid on top of the garment, but you are to be wrapped in your prayer shawl. You want to be essentially wrapped in the garment, or the partition, or the whatever you want to call it, the prayer shawl that you've been praying to Hashem in over your lifetime. That's what you want to be wrapped in. You don't want to be, like, if you remember River Phoenix, the actor who passed away, I think he was buried in his favorite metal band's t-shirt or something like that. My goodness. Okay, so here we have the corner of this particular talit gadol, and it's quite decorative. Let me see if I can read the Hebrew. What does it say? Shila Shilaim Yerushalayim. There you go. What does that mean? Something to do with Jerusalem, I suspect. As you can see, the hole there is not in the exact corner. Obviously, you can't be. How close should it be? We've got to get some sort of uniformity here, because we're an army of Hashem. So we're attired like an army. We're attired in a uniform way, and you can see that the actual string, how it's the length of the actual loop, actually presses into the garment. And very early on, when I actually started to become aware of the Torah and starting to want to obey the Torah, I was tying my own, and I made sure that the string was long enough not to cause that dent in the garment. But I since found out, I found out not long after that the actual ding in the garment, because it's not quite long enough, that's actually meant to be there because it's actually leaving the impression. The tzitizit itself is actually leaving a dent or an impression on the garment itself, and that's completely intentional. And the idea is that when the tzitizit hangs down, that it not be like this, it not be vertical, but that it sits horizontally there and then hangs down from that horizontal position. And I can't remember why. Maybe we'll get through it as we read through this Siman. So it's very interesting stuff, and it all sort of has symbolism and represents certain things, and it's beautiful. Don't for a minute think, oh, this is all traditional nonsense. It's not traditional nonsense. It's observance of things that are deduced by deductive reasoning from the text of the Torah by men and women who studied the Torah so deeply and so intensely that they have drawn out from it many things that are there, but they are hidden from the eye of the unlearned, the untrained. And so that's why it's important to listen to and read and study the sages. Go through and study the sages. Don't be afraid, and don't think for a minute that Yeshua was against Rabbinic Judaism. He was pro-Rabbinic Judaism. That was why he was so aggressive towards the Pharisees of his day, because they were totally not getting it right. They were doing it wrong. I hope that sort of becoming clearer to some of my viewers. The tzitizit strings must be tied onto the corners of the garment. Yeah, I think we've read that. Some say that these thumb breadths are measured at the place on the thumb that is narrow. I think we've read all that. Okay, I think we've finished. It is considered a main body of the garment. The tzitizit must be placed on the corners of the garment. Okay. The tzitizit strings cannot be inserted higher than this distance, because higher than 3 thumb breadths away is not considered the corner of the garment. Rather, it is considered the main body of the garment. The tzitizit must be placed on the corners of the garment. So there's a limit to how far the hole can come in on each corner. If one made the hole higher than 3 thumb breadths away from the end of the garment, even if when the tzitizit or tassel is tied onto the corner, he pulls the knot tight and wrinkles up that area of the talit garment so that the hole reaches 1 thumb breadth of the end, i.e. when measuring just a space from the hole until the end of the wrinkled garment as one would when putting a ruler next to it, the tzitizit is still invalid. The measurement of 3 thumb breadths is of the length of the surface area of the garment itself. And this is so important, because if they weren't being so specific about where the tzitizit are actually threaded through the garment, over time things will slowly slip until you're hanging them off the actual the belt loops of your jeans, of your pants. So they're very specific, because they don't want the Torah to be observed in a way that it shifts and becomes something that is unrecognizable in a couple of generations. This is why it's so important. And if more Messianic communities had teachers and leaders that were getting down and learning some of the nitty-gritty and stop flying by the seat of their pants and just trying to draw everybody in with all this prophecy-related stuff that gives people the oohs and the ahs, because after a few months, people get bored anyway and move on to somebody else that says something else that sounds amazing. You have to avail yourself of the hard yards and start to learn these things. That's why everybody shoots straight to the Zohar. And to me, this stuff is more fascinating than the Zohar. But it all is foundational to learning those high-end Torah works. Don't ever forget that for a minute. Don't think that this is just frivolous. This is not frivolous. This is important. Your well-being and your salvation depends on it. On learning the intricacies of the thing that you profess to love. You study what you love. If you don't love it, you won't study it. You won't look at the detail. You just go, oh yeah, whatever. You're not really into it. I hope you understand what I'm getting at, what I'm meaning here. It is still invalid, even though the tzitizit tassels is now within 3 thumb breadths of the end, because of the rule of you shall make the tzitizit properly from the start and not repair that which was already made improperly. Explain below in Save 6. Also, the hole should not be too close to the edge of the garment, whether in length or in width. Too close means less than the measure that there is. You don't want your holes to be in different positions on each corner. You want it to be sort of uniform and look good. With the middle, hang on, let's go back. Less than the measure that there is from the middle joint of the thumb until the tip of the thumbnail. Now, this isn't going to be applicable to most of us because most of us are just going to buy a kosher talit katan or kosher talit gadol, and all this stuff has already been done for us. But it's good to learn. It's good to read it and become aware of it. Because down the track, who knows, you might want to tie your own tzitizit, and you can. You can buy the tzitizit separate, and you can buy a talit katan or a talit gadol without the actual woven and twisted threads, and you can do it yourself if you become confident enough and learned enough. The hole cannot be placed lower than this because less than this distance to the edge of the garment is also not considered to be the corner of the garment, but beneath the corner. Placing tzitizit onto this hole would not fulfill the requirement of tying tzitizit onto the corners of their garments. Footnote: this applies only when the first tying of the tzitizit. This applies only when first tying the tzitizit on the corner, save for regarding a case where the tzitizit were fixed properly and then the hole became enlarged. Okay. This measurement takes into account only the area of the garment itself when it is lying flat. Therefore, if the hole was appropriately distanced from the end of the garment, except that through tightening the knot of the tzitizit strings, the edge of the talit garment became wrinkled, so that now there is less than the minimum measure between the hole and the end of the garment, it is nevertheless valid, for the measurement applies only to the surface area of the garment itself. Regarding the threads that are sometimes left on the edge of the talit garment and not woven into the talit, there is a doubt if they are taken into account in the measure of the corner, both with regard to the minimum distance from the end thumb joint, with regard to the maximum distance 3 thumb breadths. Therefore, it is necessary to cut off these threads from the end of the garment before the tzitizit are tied onto the garment. See below Save 6. It is important that they be cut before the tzitizit are tied onto the garment. This is a footnote. For if, when the tzitizit strings were tied onto the hole was part of the maximum distance from the end, including these threads, and then he cut them. Putting the hole now within the appropriate distance, the tzitizit would remain invalid because of the rule of that which mandates that the tzitizit must be valid at the time of tying. See above in this save, and see below Save 6. At the time, so we're up to number 4. Are we? No, we're not. I've jumped ahead. With regard to the talit katan, some have a custom to make 2 holes adjacent to each other, and sometimes you can buy a talit gadol and a talit katan with 2 holes in each corner, and that's a particular type of tie that's done according to some rabbis and some Jewish orthodoxy, in the form of the Hebrew vowel zereh, and they insert the tzitizit strings into both of the holes so that they hang on the outside of the talit. I think I remember, I have another talit. I think this one that I use has the 2 holes, but I've only used one of the holes because I think I tied those tzitizit myself. And that other method with tying it with the 2 holes was a bit too beyond me. So there's a hole in each of the garment that is not used, and I think that's okay. I'm pretty sure that's okay. All right, what else? Yeah, number 4, up to number 4, I think, so that they hang on the outside of the talit. Yeah. If at the time that the tzitizit were tied onto the garment, the hole was at a proper distance from the end of the garment, and afterward the hole tore slightly, or the end of the talit tore frayed, with the result that now the tzitizit tassel hangs less than the minimum distance from the end of the garment, it does not become invalid because of this. For the Torah did not require that the tzitizit not be beneath the corner, see Save 3, except at the time that the tzitizit are actually made, i.e. tied upon the garment. As the verse Bamidbar 15:38 states, they should make themselves fringes in the corners of their garments, i.e. the requirement that they be on the corners of the garment and not be beneath the corner is only when they are being made. So the IDF, the religious members of the IDF, they all wear talit katan under their uniforms, and in combat the tzitizit can see a bit of damage, but according to halakha, they can get a bit of wear and tear before they're seen as being invalid. If they initially start out as being kosher, they can take a bit of a beating before they're finally, they have to be replaced or be repaired. Nevertheless, ideally, it is good to make a binding around the hole in which the strings are placed. And so some of the holes that you'll see here, if you look very carefully, there's a stitching around the center hole there. I hope you can see that in the video. So the hole doesn't tear. See below, Save 17, and likewise a binding on the edge of the talit garment to prevent fraying, so that the distance between the hole and the end of the garment does not become less than a thumb joint long. Although the tzitizit would still be valid if this occurs. This precaution is taken so that one can avoid wearing tzitizit that appear invalid to people who do not know the halakha. According to Mishnah Berurah 11:51. 5. The Torah refers to tzitizit both as zidolim, a braided tassel, according to Devarim 22:12, forgive my terrible Hebrew, and tzitzit, which is fringes, Bamidbar 15:38. We learn from this that the tzitzit tassel must consist of both a braided portion and a portion of free hanging strings. So even the Torah, studying the Torah in depth, as I said, gives away the fact that there is actually a way the fringes are tied, not as you want to have them tied. Oh, I want to tie them with 10 braids and 2 loops and 4 ties, and because it represents my cousin's uncle's brother who fought in World War II. Forget it. Go off and join a Rotary Club and do us all a favor. This is like you're joining the family, you're joining yourself to the nation of Israel, and they have a cadence, and you've got to march to that cadence. You can't make up your own. There's just too many heroes, and we don't have time for the heroes, especially now. We've rounded a corner and we're in the home straight, and so we need to take this seriously. And the best way to prepare for Messiah's return is to be found studying the Torah. Don't go and buy a swath of land in the middle of nowhere in the mountains and hold up there like something out of a Mad Max film. It's just, you're off your head. You're off your head. Start learning and studying, and stop. Anyway, I'm going on a rant now, aren't I? Let's get back into it. To prevent fraying, so the distance between the hole and the end of the garment does not become less than the thumb joint, although the tzitizit would still be valid if this occurs. Number 5, I think we've already read. No, we haven't. Okay, number 5, the Torah refers to tzitizit both. Yeah, we've just read the beginning of Save 5. We learn from this that the tzitizit tassel must consist of both a braided portion and a portion of free hanging strings. I just read that. This save sets out the length of the tassel, the portion of the braid to be free hanging portion. To the free hanging portion. Both of these measures are of rabbinic origin. footnote 34. See Mishnah Berurah 1166, and describes the specific manner of forming the braid based on custom. So they're talking about the actual length. They're not talking like I'm saying, okay, you can find this out in the scriptures that they're meant to be a braided portion. and there's meant to be a tied portion on the fringes, but the length is worked out via rabbinic reckoning. It is the custom to make in the tzitizit tassel 5 sets of double knots, creating between them 4 links, i.e. spaces between the knots that are filled by wound strings. And at the beginning of the video, we looked at that here. The 13 windings and the 26 double knots equals 39, which is the numerical value of Hashem is 1. And so I think that's pretty clear. I don't know whether they're going to get into it here. I hope so. It is the custom to make the tzitizit tassels 5 sets of double knots, creating between them 4 links, i.e. spaces between the knots that are filled by wound strings. The exact specification, and what you do is when you're making them, you're counting them each time you're doing it, you're pushing them tight together. The exact specifications of these knots and links is now described. That is, one inserts the 4 strings into the hole so that half of each string hangs from one side of the hole and half from the other side of the hole. In all, 8 strings are hanging from the hole. 36. That is the 2 strings. That is the 2 ends of each of the 4 strings that were inserted through the hole. As you will see, one of the strings should be longer than the other 3, and it is wound around the others in the form of links. See later in the safe. It is inserted. So I'm reading a footnote here. Excuse me. It is inserted so that on one side of the hole it ends at the same length at the other as the other strings, and on the other it is longer. So it's the longer one is required to be longer because that's going to be wound around, which eventually will be shorter, and they'll be roughly the same length. But if you find that they're still out of whack, you can actually trim them to make sure they're the same length. Some people have the custom to make sure the techelet string is longer than the white strings. It depends which who you buy them from, I guess, or who you study and learn and what you want to go after. Because there's always wiggle room. There's always wiggle room. And then he ties them together with 2 knots, treating the 4 ends on the one side as one unit, and the 4 on the other as one unit, and tying the 2 sides together in a double knot. He then winds with the long string referred to as the shamish, that is the servant string, 7 revolutions around the other 7 strings. So that's one thing I've failed to mention so far. The techelet, the sky blue thread, is referred to as the shamish thread of the fringes, and that is the servant thread, which represents Messiah. And then ties all 8 strings again with another 2 knots. I do have a little bit of an image here that I'll hopefully put up on the screen for you. You can actually have a closer look there and pause the video and study it. If you have a copy of this book, you've got it right in front of you. He then winds the shamish another 8 revolutions around the other strings and ties 2 more knots to complete the second link. He then winds the shamish 11 revolutions. So this is the breakup of the 13 windings. 11 revolutions, and ties another 2 knots to complete the third link. Seven revolutions, 8 revolutions, 11 revolutions, and 13 revolutions. Excellent. He winds the shamish around the final 13 revolutions and ties 2 more knots, completing the 4th and the final link. There is now 4 links surrounded by 5 sets of double knots. Forgive me if I missed a bit. Since it is considered a beautification of the tzitizit tassel that all the links should be of equal length, despite the fact that each of the links is made of different number of revolutions. Therefore, when one is winding the shamish string in the first link, which contains a smaller number of revolutions, he should distance the revolutions slightly from each other. In the second link, in which there are more revolutions, he should bring them a bit closer together by winding them tighter so that the length of this link will equal that of the previous one. The same progression should be employed with the 3rd and 4th links so that the 4 links will each be of equal length. No mention of cutting yet. So even though I said you could cut, don't take my word for it. I only take my word for it when I'm actually reading from the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, okay? Just to cover myself. The measurement of the full length of the tzitizit tassel when fully formed and knotted, that is from the utmost knot that is closest to the garment until the end of the strings, must be at least 12 thumb breadths long. i.e. between 9.6, roughly between 24 to 28.8 centimeters. So according to the footnote, the beauty of the tzitizit tassel also requires that all the links together, i.e. the complete braided, oh, excuse me, I've just kicked my little partition, my little lectern here. The beauty of the tzitizit tassel also requires that all the links together, i.e. the complete braided part of the tassel, should equal a third of the overall tassel size, and the part of the tassel that makes up that is made up of hanging strings should be 2/3 of the overall tassel. This is the footnote reads, this is the optimal arrangement. However, even if the braided part makes up most, but not all the tassel, the tzitizit are still valid according to Mishnah Berurah 1167. Likewise, if the fringes make up more than 2/3 of the entire tzitizit tassel, as is common, it is also acceptable. Okay, it's good to know. Therefore, in order that this ratio should be achieved, you should make sure that each link and its accompanying knot measures a thumb breadth in length, so that all of the links together will equal 4 thumb breadths, and the part of the tassel made of the hanging strings should be 8 thumb breadths. If the length of the hanging strings will be longer than 8 thumb breadths, he should make the links slightly longer. So that the 1/3 to 2/3 portion is preserved. It is good to make sure to make all the knots of the tzitizit tassels from the 4 strings that originally hung down on one side of the hole, with the 4 strings that originally hung down from the other side. In this way, each of the 4 original strings will end up with one half of it hanging down on one side of the final knot of the tassel and one half on the other sides of see below Safe 13. 44, the footnote here says, footnote 44, it says, if the tassel was not made in this way, the result will be that both halves of the same string can be hanging down from the same side of the lowest knot. The disadvantage that would result from this situation will be explained in Safe 13. And I think we're going to leave it there. So we managed to get up to Safe 6. And I think there's 21 Safim in this particular Siman. It's a big one, it's a long one, because it's such an important mitzvah, and we never got to look at the techelet. Oh, we are looking at the techelet in terms of the tying, but some of you might be thinking, well, hang on, what about Orthodox Jews? They don't wear tzitzi. Generally speaking, some do. They don't generally wear tzitzi with the techelet. And that is because there is a disagreement over the sea snail or the cuttlefish, which one is the kosher. Some believe it's neither. And they pretty much stay to their prior customs. So if their rabbis weren't taught to change and go over to... Because at one time in history, I guess I should mention this, one time in the past, the actual authentic sea animal that provided the techelet, the blue blood that the shamash string is soaked in, disappeared from the world, almost like the temple being destroyed. In accordance with that, roughly around the same time, they were not able to fish out any of these sea animals to dye their threads blue. Also, leading up to that, Rome put a ban on Jews in being able to use the sea animal to dye their tzitzi, and instead the Romans utilized it to dye their royal garments. And so you can see this is probably one of the motives that Hashem decided to actually pull this animal into extinction, reduce this animal to be extinct from the world. But I don't know when, but sometime not in the so distant past, they believed that the animal resurfaced again, whether it was this particular sea snail or this cuttlefish, this type of cuttlefish. So, yeah, some Orthodox Jews, particularly Breslov, I think, you might get some Chabadniks that have got the techelet, but generally speaking, the higher authority of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish world, they still just wear all white tzitzi threads, and I think they mark one of the cords with some marker. I think I read this as I was reviewing this before I recorded the video, so they know which is the shamish thread because they're all white. and some believe they're waiting for the Messiah to actually show up before they go one way or the other and decide to wear the tzitzi with the tekelet. And of course, Messiah, once he arrives, that's going to be one of the things he's doing. He's going to clarify all these things. Now that was pretty intense. We've looked at a lot of things, and it gets fairly complicated with the tying of the tzitzi. But just best thing to do is to buy a kosher tzitzi, tzitzi katan, a small one, which I have underneath this garment here. Make sure you get the right size. And Talit Biz do sell the tekelet. You can get it with the tekelet. I think you have to pay an extra $20 US for that. And get yourself a nice Talit Gadol, a nice larger prayer shawl. And the bigger the better, because that's what you're going to be wrapped in when you go to the grave. And on that positive note, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me. That's a bit of a downer, isn't it? I'm trying to pull myself out of this, and I can't think of anything to say except to say that have a great day, and I hope you have a great Shavuot. All right, bye for now.